Hi, you're watching Editor's Take. I am Priyanka Sahay and I have with me Gaurav Choudhury, Deputy Executive Editor of Moneycontrol with us. Hi Gaurav, thank you so much for joining us. Now, retail inflation has actually touched a 7 months high at about 3.5% in May this year. Now, Gaurav, why don't you begin by telling us what has led to this spike in the first place?
So retail inflation has touched 3.05% in the month of May. It's a 7-month high, but the right way of looking at that is that it still remains very comfortably within below 4%, which is the RBI's comfortable range, tolerable range. And so there is some degree of base effect at work here. We also see some kind of inflationary pressures building up in the food space. But having said that, regardless of the fact it's a 7-month high, retail inflation remains comfortably within the RBI and the government's tolerable limits. And also, it's a 7-month high at 3.05% means it was remarkably low consistently for a very long period of time in the months preceding May.
So, will there be any hike in the prices of food and vegetables, and to what extent could that pinch the consumers?
So, the important thing here to watch out for is how the summer rains behave.
Right.
Monsoon is delayed, has landed in India, then made the landfall in India last week, about 10 days ago, about 7 days ago, and it's delayed by a week. There are chances that it could weaken, and because of a cyclonic development on the western coast. If it weakens, then if it doesn't cover the entire part of the country by the end of June or maybe by the first week of July, then there could be a problem because please remember 70% of India's total crop is actually from the summer sown kharif crop.
Absolutely.
And that is essentially in the cereal space, it's essentially the paddy or rice, and paddy requires knee-deep water. So it is important for monsoon to behave. If monsoon doesn't, if the monsoon is not normal, or if the spatial distribution of monsoon is uneven, then we are probably looking at a possibility of a rise in food inflation from the record low levels currently.
All right. And at this point in time, how fair would it be to say that this spike could further push RBI to cut down the rates?
No, so if it keeps on rising, then it could actually work in the opposite way. So
Okay.
RBI has cut rates 3 times in 3 successive policies since February this year. And if it continues to remain below 4%, comfortably below 4%, I would not rule out another rate hike again, a repeat action again in August. But having said that, we need to find out to what extent the government is, probably at this point in time, the government will be more worried about industrial production rather than inflation, because inflation remains firmly bottled up. The Gini seems to be firmly bottled up, regardless of the fact that it has crossed 3%. Industrial production is something that the government will keep a close eye on.
Now, the IIP data, the numbers that you have, has actually grown by 3.4%. Now, that seems to be big relief. What do you have to say to that?
So we need to see whether this is just a one-off or this rise actually remains consistent over the next couple of months or so.
Right.
My own belief is that my own assessment is that it is not going to remain, the production levels are not going to remain at persistently high levels. That is, the growth is not going to remain at persistently high levels. If you go by what's happening, say for instance, data coming in from the proxy indicators, say for instance, car sales has plunged to, has contracted in the month of May, and it's at a multi-year low. So if people are buying fewer cars, it means car companies are also going to produce fewer cars, and that is something that the government will be worried about.
Now, will this have any impact on the consumer durable as a segment as well?
It will, because if people are not buying cars or buying fewer cars, tomorrow people could be buying fewer televisions.
Right.
And that's not a good sign, because please remember that consumer durables industry, as also the car industry to a very large extent, is dependent on rural income. And if the monsoon doesn't behave well, if it doesn't behave normally, if there's scanty rainfall, it affects farm income, which in affects rural demand for most of these goods. That is something that the consumer durables industry will be acutely aware of.
So, well, fair to say that while the car sales have already been impacted, we have the numbers with us. Consumer durable numbers, we'll have to wait for some more time to
Correct.
see.
So, consumer durables sales are not as dependent on future income
Right.
as it is dependent for cars. For instance, 90% of the cars are probably sold through finance. People finance those cars through various kinds of loans
Right.
from banks and NBFCs. So car sales are also dependent as much on price income as much on the people's belief about what their future income will be, because they should be able to finance their car purchase over a period of 5 years or so. Today, if it is car, consumer durables could be tomorrow, and people could defer the purchases of televisions and refrigerators and some of these high-end consumer durable goods, if they believe their income is going to remain flat, or if actually income starts falling, if, particularly rural income, if monsoon doesn't behave normally.
Absolutely. Now, thanks so much for joining us in this discussion of Editors Day. Stay logged on to Money Control for more news and updates. Thanks for watching.